Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Legendary Interviews series. I'm here today with Gabriel Schwepler, and the reason why I want to have him on is he's one of the artists who's working on the art for my latest language learning card game that's called Heading into Language Land. And not only does he have a great combination of dark fantasy and whimsical styles, but he's also really generous with his time. And we've been on a few video calls to bounce ideas back and forth and really get into the details of the art that I want to have done. So if you're interested in language learning, if you're interested in the next game that's coming out, if you're interested in producing your own art or working with artists, I think you're really going to like today's interview. And I just as a little teaser, because I'm currently play testing with the game, I want to show you one of the cards with Gabriel's Treebeast character. Now we're going to get into this and we're going to show it to you up close. We're going to talk about some details about how he developed this art, but I just want to give you a little glimpse of it now. And before we talk about the art as well, Gabriel has some experiences with language learning. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that at first.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm a native English speaker, but when I was 11, I learned Arabic and I became fluent in that, and so that's my language learning experience. What specifically were you curious about?
What do you think about that language?
Um, okay, so it's the second language that I really in. So I don't have a lot of experience. Like I can't compare it with other languages, but
Mhm.
supposedly it's a very difficult language for English speakers to learn just because very different grammar, very different vocabulary. So I really like it. I think what I like most about it is just how I feel like I can think in a different way when I speak in Arabic because I know how Arab speakers speak, and that's directly linked to how they think.
Mm-hmm.
It's an entire new culture in my mind with learning that language and understanding how it's used.
I don't think I mentioned this to you before, but I took Arabic for 1 year in college and I really liked it.
Huh.
Yeah, I think the and
Yeah,
writing the script, learning how to write the script is such a beautiful
yeah,
script. And the fact that they drop out vowels to shorten things down when you're writing, I mean, that was really neat. And learning how to make some of those sounds further back in the throat. But I lost pretty much all of it because I haven't used it for so long. But at the time, I was
yeah.
pretty good with the
Ayin, that's the hard one.
Good, good. I'm gonna,
Ayin.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna have you on again just to talk about Arabic. But now let's shift to the art. And I want to ask you, because people are probably going to be really curious about this, how did you get into doing art and becoming an artist? How did that start?
Yeah, so I've been doing artery. My parents will tell you stories of, me drawing camels with, I think it was something like 7 humps and 4 tails and something wild. But I've just always imagined these different worlds and these different things in my mind, and then I've always wanted to see them. And so that's just driven me throughout my entire life to draw. And I remember one time when I was like 11, seeing certain pieces of art in the style and the shading and all that. And I remember thinking like, being able to take any image that you have in your mind and paint it so that it looks real, like
Mm-hmm.
that's better to me than any kind of superpower. Like that was just, I wanted that. And so yeah, I've learned a lot more how to do that. And I just find it really rewarding.
Yeah, that really resonates with me. And that's one of the things I envy most about working with these artists is that they can bring what's in my imagination to life and make it look super real. And I'm like, man, I wish I could do that and see what it felt like. And, maybe I could, but just formal training in art is not something that I currently have at this time. But I can appreciate what you said from another angle, which is I imagine the games and what they could look like and how they could function, and then making them become a physical reality. I just get a kick out of that. But I totally see what you're saying. And one thing that I really love about your Treebeast and some of the other characters in this game is that people, through their skills, they're making them look like real living, breathing things. So there's an understanding of like anatomy and the light and the shadow and the detailing and the texturing and all of that. You can make these fantasy creatures look so real. And that just is amazing to me. So how did you feel when I first contacted you and I said, hey, I want you to work on making some art for this card game with me, thinking to have you do a Treebeast because I saw you had a talent for the fantasy characters. What was your first reaction?
My first reaction was just excited. Like I read your descriptions of all you sent me that
Yeah.
document with all the little descriptions of your different characters. Really excited imagining, like I could make these visible. I could creatures and in a sense make them almost real, make them believable. So yeah, just excited.
Yeah, and I want to tell you, you hit upon something that here that I think is important for people to understand, especially if people might be thinking to make their own games or whatever. I had a story that I already wrote in advance. So that helped me because I already had a pretty good understanding of the characters and descriptions of them that I could send to the artist. And most of the artists, they appreciate as much detail as they can get from you. So I already had a lot of detail on the characters from the story that I wrote. And that's a good segue into this character because one of the characters or types of characters in my story is a Treebeast. And they're basically a type of tree folk like you might see in Lord of the Rings or something like that. And in the story, the main character gets rescued by one and he gets stored in the chest of branches, which makes like a protective cage. And then the Treebeast just unleashes on the baddies and destroys everything around. So let's throw up this sketch. The first, I didn't have a sketch for this one, by the way. I was curious to see what Gabriel would come back with. I wasn't really sure, and this is something we talked about, I wasn't really sure what type of tree folk look he should have. Here's the first sketch. Can you see that, Gabriel?
Yeah, I remember that story that you just mentioned. Yeah, there now I can see it.
Okay, so yeah, what was your idea? And you came up with this sketch. What were you thinking?
Remember that story to read through that and see not only a description. So I got to hear like how the Treebeast interacted with people in the story, and yeah, not just a static description, but like an active one through seeing him as the part of the story. So my main thought was just, okay, when I think from Lord of the Rings, and I think of Groot from Avengers. So my first thought that I had was, I want to make this Treebeast different from both of those. Like, I don't want to just, I don't want to be cliche. That's often my first thought when coming to a new piece of art. So that's why I did what I did with the head. Instead of making just an upright trunk with a face on it, like humans, is pointing forwards, and then the trunk bends down as the neck, so it's a little more like an animal.
Such an awesome decision. And I was thinking more of the stereotypical tree folk look. And that was a choice for me to say, whoa, Matt, just hold back for a minute. Don't push that on him. See what he comes up with. And you brought something really unique to the table. So I really appreciate that you built out my universe in a unique way.
I'm really glad that you let me go with that design.
Yeah, and when you sent me this, I loved the whimsical nature of that, and I thought, wow, this would be awesome for a children's book, and maybe I will have you do some sketches for my stories in the future. One thing though, I know that we talked about and decided to change was maybe to make him look a little scarier, a little more menacing, and to push it in that way a little bit more. Let's go to the second uh, photo we have to share. So this, for the viewers at home, is just the gray area is a template sort of thing that I devised with Gabriel because we wanted to be aware of where the game text was going to go. So that's that. And Gabriel, if you want to say something about this sketch, what's happening now to your sketch work?
Yeah, so when you gave me the input, like that looks great, just can you make it a little scarier? Honestly, I was like, that's so easy to do. I was constantly thinking of ways that it could be abnormal looking and interesting as I was drawing it, and constantly telling myself like, no, I can't go all out with the scary
Yeah.
for the first sketch. But then when you gave me that input, I was like, oh yeah, easy, just longer teeth, more
Yeah.
menacing expression.
Yeah, this
So
changes.
yeah,
I
that
like
was
that.
very easy to do. And then you'll also probably notice I did a little bit more shading on this sketch than on the last
Mhm.
one. And that's to see the actual three-dimensional shape of the tree beast instead of just this flat looking sketch like
Mhm.
the previous sketch. Um, yeah, and I just tried to visualize the motion of the tree beast in action because I didn't want to just portray, like I didn't want it to be generic. I wanted to show a little bit of the action, a little bit of the story in this. So that's why I have him stomping on a
Mhm.
gablin there. And yeah, I just wanted something a little more dynamic to make it more interesting and tell a story through the piece of art.
Yeah, the stomping action was so needed. And also what I love about the mouth area is the feeling that you're bringing in, as in your own words, an insect vibe. And I thought, yeah, it
Yeah.
could be like an insect vibe, could also be like maybe a cuttlefish squid type vibe. So that just is so unique and so creepy and cool. And let's go to the next photo we have, which is a pretty big jump to getting some color on it. And now it just like looks, wow, it looks like it is real. So how did you get to this step?
Um, a lot of work. So the sketch part that goes fairly quickly. Like I can get that done in an hours with some modifications. And then to get from that stage to this stage, I just have to, take a digital paintbrush and draw in every brush stroke, draw in all the shadows, make sure that, I need to visualize before I go in and do the shading. I need to visualize where the light is coming from. I need to visualize like what materials everything in the scene is going to be, like how reflective certain surfaces will be. Yeah, all of that stuff I need to know. So for this one, for example, the light is coming from up here, and then you'll
Mhm,
notice like there's this little spotlight around the tree
mhm,
beast. And yeah, a lot of work goes into the composition. So making sure that your eye, when you look at this image, your eye goes to the right place. You don't want to get distracted by those ferns in the foreground. You want to see the tree beast and then have those other visual elements just add to that and add complexity to the scene without being a distraction.
mhm. Yeah, it just looks amazing. It blows me away. And like you said, the shading and deciding, where's the shadow, where's the light gonna hit, where's the focal point. So many considerations that I think now are maybe becoming second nature for you, um,
Yeah,
are so important to go through. Okay, let's hit,
take for me
hit
to
the
make
next
those
one.
second nature.
Yeah, yeah, it's probably like muscle memory for you now. This one, you're getting into more detail. You've added a lot more trees. Now, I think people might feel this is interesting, especially old school guys like me who don't know anything about the new art programs that you're working with, because the trees you've dropped in, they're all behind the Treebeast now. So how did you do that? I guess you can work in different layers, right?
Yeah, yeah. So with digital art, things that you can do with digital art, I tend to work fairly simply. Like the techniques that I use are not too different from traditional techniques. Like I'm not going to duplicate objects to fill in a space. I'm not going to do any of that. I paint every brush stroke that's there. Just take a color and take a brush and paint the brush stroke. But I do work in do with normal painting, and it gives you a lot of flexibility.
Mm,
So yeah, you can just add as many layers as you want, and they go in a particular order. And I painted the tree beast on one of the top layers, and then I just added a layer underneath that. So I painted in the trees behind, and I didn't even have to like carefully go around the edges of the tree beast. I just
right, right.
painted and it put the tree beast in front of those. So that is something that I really like
It's also very convenient and very
about
helpful
digital
for
art.
me too, because when I talk to the artists, and you're very good with the layers. When I talk to Gabriel and I say, hey, can we move the position of this or this or this? It's fairly easy for him to do because it's all in
Yeah.
layers. So we can adjust the positioning of things. All right, now I can show you guys more clearly now what a game card looks like. It's not totally finished yet, but let's go to that. So this is pretty much what a game card's going to look like, but I haven't finalized the text that's on here. I'm just kind of roughing in the text so I can start play testing with things, and actually ordered the cards so I can see how the fonts look on here so that everything, make sure the words are clearly visible, the font and the font size and the colors look good. One thing I do regret is that I found that I had to zoom in on the tree beast to make him look bigger and more menacing. I didn't really realize that was going to happen at first, and I feel bad that I wasted Gabriel's time to create so much detail around the margin area. But a lot of the characters in art are pretty big in the center to right side. So the tree beast was looking too small compared to the others. So I had to zoom in on him and we lost some of the neat details. But luckily the stomping action on the baddie is still there. And these are word categories in the center. So when you play the game, you're going to move a piece. If you flip over this card, you find the tree beast, you're going to roll a dice, choose a word category to speak about. And if you can do that successfully, the tree beast will join your team and help you in battles against other players later. By the way, guys, at this point, I should remind you, if you have any questions or comments, leave them down below, and very likely myself or Gabriel can respond to you there. And if you want to have some artwork done by Gabriel, we're going to put links to his stuff in the description so that you can find him. And now we're going to move on to the backs of the cards. So I had a really great experience working with Gabriel, and he's willing to get on video calls with me, as I said, to really discuss the finer points of what I need to have done. And so I realized that was going to be essential for me going to do the backs of all the cards, because the backs are very important because they really brand the game. Of course, people see a lot of the backs when you're playing the game they're in people's hands and they're on the table face down, and I might be using them for the second, third, fourth installment of the game. So I decided I really wanted to be able to work closely with the artist on that. Let's look at the sketch that I had that I originally sent to Gabriel. What I wanted to do was, because this is going to be a card-based board game, and what that means is the cards create the board, I wanted the spaces to look like an open vista of scenery. And I wanted it to look like a space that you could move a piece into, and almost like your piece would disappear into there. So that was kind of the idea I was coming at it with, and the trees would frame the view. So what did you think when you got the sketch from me, Gabriel?
I liked it. It's a little bit atypical in a sense because often there's this kind of general rule called the rule of thirds, where often you position things in most of the art that I do at thirds of the image. So it's rare to have something symmetrical like this. But for a game, it makes a lot of sense because there is kind of that geometric aspect to laying out all the cards in a certain array. And so, yeah, it was a little atypical, but it definitely can work and look really good and suits the purpose of the card really well. So
Sweet. And now we'll move to the sketch that you came back at me with. So what was your initial approach to this?
Honestly, I felt like you did most of the work for me at this stage. Like, I don't feel like I changed that much. I guess I just re-sketched it in a way that I knew later I could come back and fill it in. So I drew the individual branches. I added a little more detail to some clouds. Yeah, so what I do at this sketch stage is just try to visualize the image a little bit better, and then often I'll fill in the areas within a certain outline in a solid color before shading it, and then that makes it a little bit easier to visualize what the whole image will look like, and it helps me to focus on different chunks of the image at once as I'm going through the shading process.
Is that what you're talking about here with this one?
Yeah. So there, I just focused on the area. I ignored the trees and the bottom of the image for the moment, and I just drew in the mountains and the plains there and the sky. And yeah, I just drew that in and started to do a little bit of shading and
That's a very interesting step. So will those
segments
colors,
like that, and that helps me to focus.
oh, sorry, there's a little delay. So that's a very interesting step. Now, will these colors always remain there in the image somehow, or is this something you take out later? Is this just to kind of orient yourself, or?
So yeah, these colors for the most part stay. I can change them because yeah, one of the perks of digital art is I can just, I could make that green a little more yellowish if I keep the light and dark tones.
Mhm.
But yeah, for the most part, those colors stay. What I do at this stage actually is, like I was talking about with layers, I'll have the black outline, I'll have that as one of the top layers, and then I will draw underneath it. So I can still see the outline over the color that I'm drawing in. But yeah, you have some color. And then after that, I'll add another layer, and this time it'll be on top of the outline. So I'll
Mhm.
add more detailing, so I'll paint over that black outline. So most of these colors stay there, but I add more detail over the top of it.
Okay, cool. I think this is the next one if I've got it right. Yeah.
Yeah, there I've added some more detail over the mountains and over the plains there. I had to touch up on my mountain drawing skills. I was a little out of practice. I've been doing a lot of portraits for a long time and not many landscapes. So I just took some, pulled up some images of mountains that I liked and tried to get, learning where the snow falls on the mountains and what parts of the mountains are steep enough that it just falls off. Like it was pretty tricky, and it took me a couple of tries to get it right.
Yeah, that looks amazing. And guys, just so you know, some of the background of the story here will help things to make sense. So the trees are going to be upside down because the main character, Metamet, he's coming through a forest where everything is backwards, upside down, inside out. Nothing makes sense. He's kind of like coming out of the rabbit hole of Alice in Wonderland or something like that. So the trees are really strange and growing upside down. And then just to give you some idea about Gabriel's level of attention to detail, I zoomed in on, he put two dragons by the volcano there, and I zoomed in on them, and I saw one was spitting fire. And we actually can see a little bit of that because I guess Gabriel's working in a very high resolution, and maybe you can talk about that too, Gabriel. But it's really, you won't be able to see it here now, but on the back of this card, if you look really closely, you can see the dragons and you can see a little bit of fire coming out. I just think that's so incredible. Can you talk a little bit about the resolution and what that means for people?
Yeah. The difference between resolution and detail. Resolution is basically the capacity for detail in a digital image. So it's how many pixels you have, and you can't fit that much detail into 800 pixels wide. But also you can have a very high resolution image that's not super high detail. But yeah, I go with fairly high resolution, but then very high detail. So I zoom wakes of digital art. Again, you can zoom in as far as you want. And I don't know why, but I've always just loved detail. And yeah, that's one of my favorite things about art, is making it as detailed as possible. I just find it more visually interesting. And it's good to have some large stretches of more simple shading, and a nice clear sky with not a lot of detail. Or I really enjoy adding a lot of detail, and that, to me, that's what makes images stand out and pop. So
for sure, and it's really adding depth to my story and my game, so I really appreciate it. And now let's pop on the last photo that we're going to share with the people, because this picture is still being worked on, so it's not totally finished yet, but this is the last stage of the progress that we're going to show you guys today. So what was going through your mind at this stage? I see a lot more work done on the wizard. We got some leaves, we got some bushes and rocks.
yeah, so I was just kind of filling in the rest of the image with the orange leaves. That was mostly just a choice. Okay, I felt like it made the image a little more interesting to have orange in there for the leaves instead of green. And then also, just like technically speaking, you have to kind of pick a color scheme, like 3 different colors on opposite thirds of the color wheel, so blue, green, and orange. And so I knew I needed some orange in there, and thought making the leaves orange would be really fun. And then you kind of drew this out in your original sketch, but the way the roots frame along the top of the image, I pulled the roots up more. You actually emailed me and said, hey, can you make these roots come frame the image a little bit? And I think that made it look a lot better. And I was just adding detail in the parts that I wanted the viewer's eyes to be drawn to, and then like filling in the rest with enough detail to complement the other parts.
Mm-hmm. About the leaves, I've been looking at, I printed off several backs and with different leaf colors, and I'm really starting to lean towards the orange now because I'm seeing the beauty of that. When you look at this back, you see blue sky, green fields, orange leaves, and that color combination is just so super attractive.
Yeah.
I love that the contrasted feeling between the orange and the blue. That seems to work really well. The green leaves by, comparison, they're a little less interesting, but we'll see what happens in the end. This is fantastic. Okay, we'll stop.
Yeah. So there are like all these different.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
No, you're
There
fine.
are all these different theories of color and how this works, and I used to just kind of do this by intuition, and basically what that meant was I would get it wrong a lot more times before I got it right. So it worked most of the time, but then once I actually sellers generally look good together, it really helps me to just get better ideas and to make images look better faster. So this is one color theory that I used here, and it's what I mentioned, like opposite thirds of the color wheel and using 3 colors, and then you can make those lighter or darker or more or less saturated, but you use those same 3 colors, and that can look really good. And it has this to it when you use 3 opposite colors. I couldn't say why, but it generally does, just that color scheme.
That is super cool. Awesome. Okay, let me stop the share now. We're back. So before we go, and I really appreciate your time here today, Gabriel, I was wondering if you could share some parting advice to beginning artists, maybe people who want to not only get better at making art, but also selling their work online. Do you have any advice for these sorts of budding creative entrepreneurs?
Yeah, definitely. Um, First off, okay, you definitely can make it as a traditional artist, using paint and pencil. But honestly, digital art it's way more marketable because it's a lot of the same techniques, but it's a lot more flexible.
Mhm.
Just ask for all these different changes that you wanted, and then I could just do them. You can't do that with a normal painting. So it's a lot more flexible. It goes a lot faster. There's a lot more room for experimentation. So if you're shying away from that just because of the technical aspect of that, I mean, that makes sense. The technical aspect, I know for a lot of artists, can be not the fun part, but once you get past that, it just actually make a living from doing art. And so, yeah, I definitely encourage getting into digital art. And then, yeah, just keep your options open. Try to be willing to do a broad variety of different things. If you have to do logo design, like if people are hiring people to make logos, then try that. And maybe you can upgrade to something that's more particularly what you start with, just something that you would enjoy more than a completely non-art related job, and then just kind of work your way up towards what you specifically love doing.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And one thing I want to add to that is things, if you've been working on your art for a while and you've got your style and you've got some pieces you can show online, business could come at you potentially pretty fast. A person like me finds you and says, "Oh, that's exactly the style that I need." I'm going to be knocking on your door. So sometimes things are a bit of a grind and success comes very slowly, But sometimes the results now could surprise you because there's so many places online now that you can set up a profile, market yourself, put up some of your work, and then boom, like there's some traffic that's passing by and looking at your stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And also, so I'm doing commission to do specific pieces of art that they would like. So I'll do custom portraits, I'll do pieces like this, I'll do illustrations for people's video games. And I find that to be a lot more marketable than just selling fine art, because the thing is, there's always more demand for custom art.
Right.
Everyone needs their own piece of custom art. Whereas if you just painting it, if you just want a generic picture to hang on your wall, prints, there are millions of those printed, and there's no limit to how many of those pieces people can print. So, for you to make a piece that thousands of people are just going to buy to hang on their wall, that's a lot more difficult than, having the talent to do custom art for someone. So yeah, for me at least, custom art has been a much better choice than just fine art.
Awesome. That really makes sense. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you for your time and coming on here today. Guys, I want to suggest you post your questions, post your comments down below of this video so we can get into a bit of a conversation between us and Gabriel. And if you liked this video, give it a like. Don't forget to subscribe. And I'm really looking forward in the future to working with you more, Gabriel, finishing that back for one thing, but I know talk has started about possibly doing a troll. And guys, stay tuned across the Legendary Language Learner social, because I'm posting some updates now and then on the artist's progress on various things, so you can kind of see the development of the game. Thanks again, Gabriel. Your work is
Thanks for having me.
Amazing.
Yeah.
All right, bye-bye for now, everybody. See you.